I've always considered myself a skeptic, especially when it comes to anything paranormal. Ghosts, spirits, and all that supernatural stuff never really made sense to me. But I can't shake what happened to me last year when I helped my cousin Jake clean out the basement of his new house. Even now, I still can't find a logical explanation. Jake had inherited an old Victorian house from a distant relative, someone he barely knew. The house was on the outskirts of a small town, far enough away from the city that the nights were unnervingly quiet. It was one of those places that had a certain charm despite the years of neglect, the kind of house that seemed to carry stories in its very walls. We spent the better part of a Saturday sifting through the clutter upstairs, old furniture, dusty books, and forgotten knickknacks. The house had clearly been left to decay for years. By late afternoon, we decided to tackle the basement. I'll admit I wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea. Basements always gave me the creeps, but I chalked it up to the usual childhood fears. The door to the basement was hidden behind a large, musty tapestry at the end of a narrow hallway. When we pulled it aside, we found the door locked with an old padlock. Jake looked surprised. "Didn't know this was locked," he muttered. "No one said anything about a locked basement." After a bit of searching, Jake found a key in a drawer full of old junk, and we managed to get the padlock off. As soon as we opened the door, I felt an icy draft come up from below. The air smelled stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. The stairs creaked under our weight as we descended, our flashlights barely cutting through the darkness. The basement was just as cluttered as the rest of the house. Boxes piled high, old furniture, and random bits of machinery. But it wasn't the mess that made me uneasy. There was something else, something that felt off. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us," Jake said, trying to lighten the mood, but even he sounded tense. As we started clearing things out, I noticed a door at the far end of the basement. It was different from the rest of the basement's decor, much older, with thick iron hinges and a heavy latch. It almost looked like it belonged in a medieval dungeon, not a Victorian house in the middle of nowhere. "Jake, come look at this," I called over to him. He walked over, his expression mirroring my unease. "That's weird. I didn't see this on any of the house plans." The door had no keyhole, just a single iron latch. For a moment I hesitated, my hand hovering over the latch. Something deep in my gut told me to leave it alone, but curiosity got the better of me. I lifted the latch, and the door creaked open. Inside was a small, windowless room. The only thing in there was a single wooden chair, placed dead center facing the door. The walls were covered in deep, jagged scratches, as if something had tried to claw its way out. The air inside was even colder than the rest of the basement, and it had a metallic, almost coppery smell. We both stood there, staring at the chair. I felt my heart pounding, and my mind raced with all the possibilities of what could have caused those marks. It felt wrong, like we were intruding on something we had no business being involved with. "Maybe we should just leave this alone," Jake said quietly. I could tell he was rattled. I wanted to agree with him, but before I could say anything, the door behind us slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. Jake cursed and fumbled for his flashlight, which he dropped in the panic. "It's probably just the wind," I said, though I didn't believe it myself. The basement was far too sealed off for any breeze to have done that. I was reaching for the door to open it back up when I heard it. A faint whispering, like multiple voices murmuring at once. It sounded like it was coming from all around us, echoing off the walls of the small room. The words were unintelligible, but the tone was unmistakable, menacing, like a warning or a curse. "Jake," I whispered, "do you hear that?" There was no response. I swung the flashlight towards where Jake had been standing, but he was gone. The beam of light revealed only the empty space where he had just been. My heart sank. Jake was not the kind of person to just wander off or pull a prank in a situation like this. "Jake," I called out, my voice trembling. That's when the whispering intensified, growing louder and more insistent. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was a chorus of voices, all overlapping, their words still incomprehensible, but filled with a sense of urgency and malice. I could feel the sound vibrating in my chest, crawling under my skin like insects. Panicking, I backed toward the door, frantically trying to open it. My fingers fumbled with the latch, slick with sweat. The They scoured the entire property, combing through the house and the surrounding woods. They even brought in dogs, but there was no trace of him. They found nothing, no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing to suggest where he might have gone. But I knew what I saw, or rather what I didn't see. I had given up hope when, 2 weeks later, Jake was found. He was discovered sitting in the woods near the edge of town, miles away from the house, in a daze. He was alive, but not the same. When I got the call and rushed to the hospital, I hardly recognized him. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his eyes had a vacant, haunted look. Jake was unable to walk. His legs had been paralyzed. The doctors couldn't explain it. There were no signs of injury, no trauma that could have caused such a condition. He didn't speak for weeks, and when he finally did, the words that came out made no sense. "He's still down there," Jake would mumble, his voice flat and distant. "Waiting in the dark. Don't let him out." It broke my heart to see him like that, a shadow of the man he used to be. He's in a wheelchair now, and he still won't talk about what happened in that basement. When I tried to bring it up, his eyes filled with terror, and he shut down completely. Jake's life will never be the same, and neither will mine. I moved away, far from that house, but the memories cling to me. I can't stop wondering what really happened down there. Every night I lie awake replaying the events in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. But there are no answers, just the chilling certainty that something is still lurking in that basement. And whatever it is, it changed Jake forever.